with us. So we want to welcome you to our second installment of Tim Talks. This morning we've already had about 4 or 5 talks at Johnston-Willis, and it has been a fantastic morning. We're getting to know more and more about the people that we spend so many hours with side by side, day to day. And it's just such a breath of fresh air compared to some of the other meetings and opportunities that we have to sit in. So sit back for the next few minutes or hour if you have the time and enjoy the speakers that we have on hand. And I will go ahead and introduce Dr. Han to come join us. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I just want to thank Tim and really for bringing such a novel concept to Chippenham. And I feel like I'm always among friends. So I really want you to feel free to ask questions and really join me on this journey, if you will. Our topic is really sailing the winds of change, and we really live in an incredible area. It's the Chesapeake Bay. It's the world's largest water estuary, only about 90 minutes away. We have really cool things. It's historical, John Smith. We have a meteor strike at Cape Charles. All of American history, Jamestown, it's really embedded right at our footsteps. So really, why do you sail? It's such an elitist and crazy concept. You only see them in J. Crew ads, but if you really look at sailors, they are the drunken, 3 sheets to the wind kind of dudes. They would not be the actors. Do you really need talent to sail? And I'm going to show you that you really don't. Let's take from our example. Do you need imagination? I think you do need imagination, and sometimes a gin and tonic or dark and stormy helps. And then music. The screams of people yelling and falling overboard can be music to your ears. 911 Coast Guard's helpful. So the view from the top of the mast is really, I'd like for you to join us on our family journey. We are called healers in a way, but we really failed at our families in a way because the seduction of medicine is that it's so time-consuming. You as nurses, you're always late. If some patient is ill, you miss the kid's recital, etc. It sometimes really makes for an odd child rearing. And I'd like for you to join us as we sort of tour the bay, going through some of these places: Lockleys, Fishing Bay, ONANCOCK, Cape Charles, YORKTOWN, and recently my son and I did make it up to New York. The view that I have is really, I'm an immigrant. My father was in the Korean Army during Vietnam War. All the Korean men are required. He was a physician. He was displaced during the Korean War, and he met the Army teams as a Korean physician. And in 1965 to 67, they needed physicians in the United States. There were maldistribution of doctors, and America opened its doors, and there were, people, professions in medicine they weren't going into, such as neurosurgery or radiology. Nobody wanted to go into those fields back then. So we came into Brooklyn after he spent 2 years at Kingsbrook's Jewish Medical Center, and I was a lad of 6 or 7 and really didn't know what America was. My parents couldn't really show us because they were busy with work, and we had 2 other siblings. So we moved from city to city really because it was a pure medical system, and we ended up in Jamestown, New York, which is up in Upper Buffalo. There's a small Chautauqua Lake, but really I never thought of sailing as something that I would do later on in life. When you get married and have children, you have professional careers, your wife is a physician, and then all of a sudden you have 5 children, it's challenging. Remember Pokemon, it's the Pokemon era. How do you compete against Pokemon? And then with 5 kids and twins, how do you raise them so that you spend time with them? So that's really the challenge. It's the year of World of Warcraft. It's wow, it's seductive. The kids are on it. Our kids are all different ages. We are busy with hospital. When you have children in Richmond, you're always schlepping them around to soccer fields. They're always in school teams. My God, with twins, and it's just terrible. So I would sit in the sidelines and see the crazy parents among them, and the only thing that was interesting was my foot, which was a dog shoe at that time. This is Noah when he was very small. We were introduced to the water gradually at cardiology conferences in Hawaii, and my gosh, when you're on a boat, you got the kids trapped. They can't run away. one of the wonderful things about sailing is that no matter where you are, this is a big catamaran in Hawaii. They'd let any random person take the helm. I mean, you don't do that on an airplane, you don't do that on a, Greyhound bus, but these captains will say, okay, take the helm, here's Ruben steering. I think that's one of the democratic things about sailing. My neighbor is a Danish fella, and he introduced me to horrible habits in our middle age. One of them was motorcycling. We would motorcycle to his boat, the Danmark 3, and at the time we were pulling kids on power boats, but there was always a distance. We're not in the same boat. We're pulling people behind. My mentor during training was a cardiologist who went to Huntsville, and every year, all the men, we would meet for a week and we do stupid things like mountain bike. We did the MOAB and also the 24-hour races, but we were again by ourselves. We thought that we would be better fathers and husbands if we went for a week and just did crazy things and not shower. But again, we're so the kids are growing between our eyes. I really feel I've missed my daughter's childhood years, and the twins are sort of wandering aimlessly. And really, Chuck Evans told us about Cat and Tom. Deltaville is really a gem of a secret, and I really encourage you to visit Deltaville. It's 90 minutes away. Life has a different pace there. Things are very the same, they don't vary. And the hardware store is the department store, and the local post office could be, your butcher. It's remarkable. Cat and Tom is a gigantic guy, and I think modern day parlance, he probably would not be a great sailboat instructor, but he was to our family. We did the 101, 103. He took us all on as a group, and as you can see, you have smiling faces. They were happy. And at the time, the kids were small. The motor was bigger than Ruben. And there's a romance of sailing. This is in Romancing the Stone, where Michael Douglas brings his, boat down Manhattan. But I didn't realize at the time that that's true fiction. You just don't see that in real life. So after this course, being a heart doctor where we think we can do anything, I said, heck, if I took this course, I could, get a boat and sail. So we had a family of 7, and I listened to the local boat sellers, and we ended up with a 44-foot sloop. And this was our first boat called Song of the Wind, named after a very squeaky violin song. And in it, this was our first outing with one of the old hands. We really didn't know what we were doing, but the boat was indestructible. It has got big rub rails. You can bash it, you can fix it, and not much damage. It was 2003, and a few months later, Hurricane Isabel hit the coast. And we were very fortunate. We really didn't know what to think of a hurricane. We just tied it up like a spider web. And after the hurricane passed, Joan and I went to the Tides End where there was no power, but we could stay on like boards. So what is a sailboat? It's really a component of very simple things. There's a mast, there's the sails, there's a keel, which is the thing underneath the boat, a rudder, and then some place to sit. This is a very expensive sailboat that campaigns on the Chesapeake Bay. This is a Hinckley called Desperado. A very old couple sails it. It's a lovely boat. But you don't need a Hinckley to sail. You just need any old thing that floats. This is the rudder. It's a massive object that turns. And then this system is the keel. These are the things that stabilize the boat so it doesn't tip over. And the concept of sailing, you can read books, you can go to courses, but basically if you can stand, put some wet saliva on your nose or in your hand and sort of feel, you can tell where the wind is coming from. If you can do that, you can sail. It's basically a wing. Modern sailboats can go upwind because it generates a lift. This is the curve. And when you have acceleration of wind, it creates a negative draft, so the boat tends to go that way. But this big thing underneath, the keel, keeps it upright, and the resultant force is forward motion. In the old days, sailboats couldn't go upwind. They were just pushed along, and we call that reaching. So there's a lot of nomenclature to sailing, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter what the heck you call it. You can call it left or right. It simply doesn't matter. Don't get intimidated by the language of sailboating. Because again, if you can tell left or right, up and down, you can sail. So the points of sail, you would hear all these jargon terms. You can't go into the wind because you have to have some angle. When your wind is coming at your side, they call it a beam reach. If you're going against the wind, the sails are close to the boat, so they call it a close call because you can touch it. And if you're going downwind, the sails are away from the boat, it's broad away, so it's called a broad reach because if you reach too far, you fall overboard. And if you're going downwind, it is running. If you're turning the boat against the wind, they call this tacking. And then when you're turning the boat while you're going downwind, it's called jibing. So if your husband comes home and says, honey, I jibed today, it doesn't mean he lied or anything, he just out downwind. And there's a lot of other nomenclature, like lines on a boat are called sheets if they control the sails. I was talking to Dr. Christopher, who was operating on a gentleman who is 3 sheets to the wind. In the old days, you remember there were 4 lines that held square riggers. And if you lost one line, the sail would flop, you would lose a little bit of control, a little tipsy. If you lost 2 lines, you lost a little bit more control, more tipsy. And if you lost 3 sheets, then you are really tipsy and the boat would stagger. So if your girlfriend says, my God, honey, you are 3 sheets to the wind, it means, boy, you better go home and let me drive. If you're 4 sheets, you're unconscious, so that's not good. So there's a lot of fun things with sailing and nomenclature, and this is the last technical aspect of sailing. When we sail, and just like in life, we're sailing apparent wind. The wind goes in one direction, you go in one direction, and its resultant vector. So if you're going against the wind, you have a 10 knot against you, and you have a velocity of 5 knots, you'll actually be going faster than the wind speed. You'll be 14, 15 knots. If you're going downwind and you have a 10 knot of wind, then your vectors add up and you really seem calm. Your relative motion ceases. So just like in life, it's the same wind, but the apparent directions that you take, upwind or downwind, does make a difference. So when we got our boat, we were in a little creek up the Rappahannock River, which is really now famous by the Rappahannock Oyster Company, Merwa or Land Sea. It's the brothers who've created an oyster bed. This marina is quite beautiful. It's only sailboats there and well protected from Isabel on the Regent Point side, but on the Lockley side got totally devastated. And I would encourage you to take the drive out to Topping, where this little stand is. You can get lovely food. You have to go to McDonald's or something afterwards, but it's lovely. They have wonderful food. It was in the Today Show, and it's a piece of, it's really a quaint gem, authentic. Regent Point is interesting because the people there are really old salts. They are salt of the earth, and most of the time they gather around and stay around cockpits. But this is a heart transplant survivor going out in his Morgan Outlander. They're really out there in any weather. And if you are in Deltaville and on the eastern part of the United States, everybody knows about Fishing Bay Harbor. It's a quirk of geography guarded by Gwen's Island to the south and Stove Point, which some farmer thought was unsuitable for land, but only really wealthy people live there now because they have the bay and the creek on the other side. It's a natural haven for small boats and for big boats, and it's where people race. So as a young person with 5 kids, we were racing, which really wasn't great because we really didn't know how to sail in the first place. These are old classic boats. And when you see something like this coming at you wing to wing, it means I better get the heck out of the way. And we try to copy some of these by, using poles and things like that. That didn't work out too well. Most of these races in the summer are very hot. So the next year when we were racing, my wife was reading Dead in the Water, and we were dead in the water. Poor cupcake is sleeping. In the following years, we got more wind, we had a lighter crew and faster speed, and then the Virginia Tech guys came and we needed more bulk. We realized that one reason why we were failing is the boat, we need to weigh the boat down. And when you are in the heat of the action at these kinds of regattas, you have a lot of close calls. These are guys coming at each other. Believe it or not, these 2 boats missed. This isn't a Photoshop imagery. I was able to swing clear. And through the years, The crew changes, different girlfriends, etc. migrate back and forth. This is George Burke, our eminent Dr. Burke. He is manning the sheets while his lovely wife sails. And when you see George Burke on the water, you just get the heck away because he is an incredible sailor, the Commodore of his club. And as time evolved last year, we realized what we're missing is a bigger dog. And so with Waverly on the rail, we finally were able to win one of these races, but by the time they compensate for length, etc., we were like fourth or so. But it's good when you see pictures of other boats and you're ahead of them rather than you see beautiful views of their behind. One of the other interesting parts is our bay at the southern part is just incredibly nicer than Annapolis or St. Michael's or all those weird places up north. The southern bay is vast. It's 25 to 30 miles in depth across, and you really have a hard time seeing. It feels like a little ocean. One of the most incredible places is ONANCOCK. This is where John Smith also went. It's almost halfway into the eastern shore. It's about a 6-7 mile journey up the creek, and it's a good depth all the way, and there's a lovely town. We made this trip for the first time in 2004 again as a novice, and during spring break, cold kids instead of skiing. We had Grog Island back then. It's been bashed by hurricanes. I would never do this now, but we parked right behind Grog Island. I thought, wow, I saw it in a magazine, why not? It's not a very protected area. Luckily, it was not a very heavy night. And the kids, just followed along because they were kids. They were trapped. The post office views in ONANCOCK changes over the years. And the trip up the river, this is almost biblical because with the tidal changes, you do see people walking on water. And it's a lovely place. And the trip across the bay, often in the company of other boats, is a windy one, and sometimes not so windy. And again, the boyfriends and girlfriends all change. And what stays constant is our trip across every year because they have great restaurants there. So the eastern shore is really a wild, wild place, completely different from what we see. Cape Charles and Chesapeake is at the tip. And we often would tow the kids when they were small, but when you tow them, you become the towee sometimes, and then you call Towboat US. This is Jackson Creek, and the tidal shifts get us stuck, and then you have to call these guys to push you off. Just like Key West, Cape Charles has a western sunset. It's quite gorgeous. They just redid the town harbor, and the restaurants there are fantastic. Bay Creek was a very ambitious project. It's under new ownership, but quite beautiful and challenging golf courses. And further south, before the Bay Bridge Tunnel, they used to have ferry boats come, and then they sank all of these concrete ships of World War II as a ferry wall. There's wonderful fishing and bird watching there. This is a look at the Bay Bridge Tunnel. It's really one of the world's wonders. And again, if you have nothing to do, I would spend a few dollars and go to the eastern shore by car. Is worth the trip. Hidden among the western side of the bay is Yorktown and MOBJACK. And the winds are consistent. You have a tidal current, and often your dogs take over your cockpit. Summer storms come and go. They're fiery, but they go away. But the end result of going to Yorktown is beautiful. The 4th of July concerts, the Coleman Bridge is just fantastic. What do kids do? One of the reasons why we sailed is really because children seem to have the best time. This is Noah with his little buddy. They have fun, they talk. They are really playing. It's not organized sports, they play with each other. They have funny things when you go to these rallies, blindfold people and then make them row around. You park, people sleep, you row these little dinghies. They start with electric motors, and then it's really giving a kid a chance to captain his own vessel. He's in charge of where he's going, he can point, and then he graduates to bigger motors, into relaxation. He grows up, he helps friends. This is Cameron, who was in the Deltaville Twister. It hit Sturgeon Creek. He was the boy underneath his bed with the dog, ended up in the creek, was okay. And the poor Zor church was destroyed, but it is now rebuilt. After that week, we took him sailing. And they grow up to do their own thing. And I really hope that he's sailing not because of me, but because he enjoys it. These are little lasers. And they were up in Cork, the Canadian racing up in Kingston. These guys in the, they're sailing 49ers. It's the craziest thing where they're standing up and sailing these very fast boats. And then they go off into the race. It's a sort of a uplifting for parents, but it's also scary at the same time. And now he is a boy of 17. So what is it like to be on board? It's basically sleep. You read, and you meet other sailboats for an excuse at a party, and you sing, and you play the saxophone, and then you bring your kids who play the trombone. You basically play on the water. And my wife loves crabs, which I'm deadly allergic to. And the kids play chess, and they play cards. So the whole thing, this is play, it's imagination. It's not being tied down to electronics. And the older guys, I mean, these are typical sailors. They come in all different sizes, all different walks of life, and anytime they gather at a bay, you gather at somebody's cockpit and, you know, tell stories. And it's a great reason for a Christmas card. This last week for spring break, I was taking Noah and I to, we wanted to circumnavigate Delmarva. You go around and go up the eastern shore and then go up to Delaware Bay and come down the bay. It's a next logical thing for us to do. And so we went on this Delmarva expedition. We saw the boats. It's April, it's cold, the guys were already sailing. And this is Margaret, who's a wonderful sailor, intrepid. You see great sunsets, and this is looking far west. And then the moon rises. It was supposed to be a full moon. And it was the blood moon, if you remember, about a month ago. We exit the Baltimore Channel, and then we're traveling outside in the Atlantic Ocean, a little above the 3 nautical mile line. This is the ocean side of Virginia. It's an incredible place. It's hard to access. Nature Conservancy has bought a lot of this land, and this is as John Smith saw it, as the natives have seen it. I had a little sat phone because there's no cell service. You can rent these things for about $75, and we saw the moon come up. We made it into Cape May, New Jersey, and I didn't realize his girlfriend was going to be in New York, so he campaigned all night. Let's go to New York. Let's go. My gosh, you had to have a little imagination. We looked at our weather routing. These little winds mean that it's a 25-hour, 25 knot, but we were going out to the east and then tacking into New York. So because the wind was behind us at 25 knots, we figured if we're going like 7 or 8 knots, it would be only a 15-knot wind. We're sailing apparent wind. So I swallowed my gumption, and it's really, we took off. This is the Jersey Shore, Atlantic City coming up, beautiful sailing. It gets cold at night in April, and then I didn't realize that the Labrador Current is there. The water is only 45 degrees. We have a south wind which is in the 60s, and then you get fog. I've never seen wind and fog, but this is how a lot of the ships wrecked off the Jersey Shore. This is what it looks like at dawn with the fog. And then, you know, we're rewarded in the next morning by the Verrazano Narrows. This is the Verrazano Narrows in the fog. In New York Harbor, its history, the first shots of the Revolutionary War were fired here, and the last shots were fired here. Walter Cronkite details this in his wonderful book, Across America. This is Brooklyn, and this is Staten Island, and this is where the Verrazano Narrows Bridge is. If you go further inland, this would be Manhattan and Jersey City. In fact, Jersey City is a powerful place. It's probably one of the great locations, and we ended up in this little marina called Liberty Landing. From, you can see Liberty, the statue, and then this is the Goldman Sachs building. And as an immigrant coming into New York and seeing the Narrows and the Statue of Liberty, it really felt heart-lifting. It is, you feel a part of humanity. It's the same feeling you have when you run down the Monument 10K. The Staten Island ferry is very, you stay clear. And when you're docked, you look out and you see the World Trade and Manhattan in its glory. And this little ferry takes you back and forth every 30 minutes. If you ever are afraid of going to New York, I would tell you to go to Jersey City go to the Liberty Landing National Park, great parking, safe to do, very inexpensive, and take the 30-minute ferry into Wall Street. It takes you right into the financial district, and then you can take the subway wherever you go. And the restaurant there is called Liberty House. It's a great restaurant. We did manage to go to the Metropolitan Museum because it snowed that morning in New York. We did come back. It was beautiful weather, and we did route because the winds were now coming from the north. We met some sailors, and this is what swells look like in the ocean. You can't, they're like 6-7 feet swells, but the period is long, so the boat rides them really gently. And it's really exhilarating, but it's cold at night. And when we saw the Bay Bridge now at 11 p.m., it's really a protective armor to the Chesapeake Bay. And we have our memories, and we're not going to be sailing around the world because the winds of life do change. And I think what sailing teaches us that it is capricious. This is my mom a couple of years ago, and then after a stroke, debilitated and in a wheelchair. And I think the lesson is that you've got to live now. You have to plan. You have to play with your kids. You can run marathons, but this little guy here grows up very quickly through his bar mitzvahs and music as a part of his life. And even though I really decry organized sports, I'm an active participant. All our kids have done it, and I've never seen such joy when Mark's Matoka team beat Thomas Dale for the first time in centuries. I mean, their parents were crying. And this fella who is Woody, we met a couple of years ago. He ran 8 marathons in 8 months to celebrate his 80th birthday. Kevin has been our coach. He's the bravest person who survived sudden cardiac arrest and then still running marathons. He was written up in the Richmond paper. So we had Song of the Wind and Enchantress, and you've gone with us on a little trip around the bay. But it's really that winds do change. We really sail as a way, it's a medium of exploring and learning. You can always continue to learn about new things. I would never be afraid to try new things. I think talent is not inborn, it's really developed. And it is through experience that we really, harness talent. Imagination is cultivated. You have to have young people, old people. Noah made us go to New York. Woody teaches us never give up at 80. And music is a language of love. It's really the love of the joy. So what we found is that we are really enchanted by the songs of the wind that we harness. And this is just a little glimpse of what it is to come out of New York with play. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think that's certainly been an enjoyable trip with you. Thank you. We'll go ahead and let that